I'm Allison Woods. I am an interdisciplinary artist, but I mainly work in photography at the moment. I live in Lincoln, Nebraska, and I am a recent graduate with a BFA in art with an emphasis in photography and a minor in art history, and I am currently just working on my studio practice and working to make money so I can possibly go to grad school. I know definitely I wanted to just be able to kind of discuss the collective understanding and experience that kind of all artists are going through currently with just the pandemic and being in quarantine, and how even though there's this really large like cultural push to make art and make things because we're at home doesn't mean that that is always what we need to do. That was definitely something that I thought of immediately, because it's almost always people asking, oh, well, what have you made since you have been in quarantine? And it's difficult when it's somehow seen as a disappointment that you haven't made anything, or you haven't made this grand new idea to start. Any kind of progress or any kind of work is beneficial. And I just want to put that out there that I'm still working on a series that I've been working on for 2 years now, and it's constantly just, yeah.
Can you tell me about your photography book, Jewel, that you worked on last year?
Yes. It kind of just started on how my year was going. And it was last fall, and I was in a lot of complicated situations, from switching my whole entire thesis that I was going to be doing that next spring, to coming out of a relationship and trying to figure out what I wanted to do, if I wanted to go to grad school, and just kind of a lot of big changes that I didn't know. And so the book was compiled of, actually, I'm gonna get it because I have it. Look at that, I have it. It's compiled of photographs and scanned items. I'm not gonna say pieces of paper because I have more than that, but photos, scanned objects and items, and then some written text. And I've always had this compelling interest in things that we don't disclose to people, but we feel strong enough to just let out into the world. So a Finsta, or a Twitter account that only a few people follow, or a journal, something that you don't care if certain people see, but are still so secret or so intimate that you have to select who sees it. And so that kind of disconnect of who's allowed in or who's allowed to be intimate with you without actually not having a connection was something that I was always interested in. And so I started pulling different images that I had on my Finsta, images that I remember feeling very strongly about, and then objects that have some kind of meaning to me. And also the text that's in it is written by hand, and things that I had written in a journal, notes that I had written down after an event, or something that was on my Finsta, like a caption. And most of these are, you can't quite really read it, but all of them are handwritten and in the book. There's no text otherwise. Even the front cover is my own handwriting. So it just kind of started from there. And within this photo book, I kind of learned that you don't always have to be traditional in how you make things. And I tried to play with spacing and how objects and pictures work together and work opposing each other, and how within a book format, it's different than seeing something on a screen or just looking at a photograph on a wall. So for instance, something like this that has a very non-traditional layout with these three, and then just one right here, it just kind of arises of like, why do these things connect? Why are these placed here? Is it intentional? Is it unintentional? And then immediately following that page with only a short text that's read. And so that kind of literal physical space where you have to breathe and understand what's going on is important. It grew into this intimate but distant photo book and assignment, and I really felt comfortable in how it was created, but uncomfortable with the fact that it's a book that's going to be handled. Because I knew that I'm letting myself be a little bit more open about my life and what I find to be important. And that's sometimes really difficult to let go and actually like let occur. And even with the title, it's called Jewel, because my middle name is Jewel, and I never really make that known. I don't really tell people. It's not in my signature. It's not something that like, yeah, I'm Allison Woods. It's just, it's a part of me that I feel connected with, but I don't feel connected with to show people or let people know. And I thought was like the right metaphor for what the book is as well.
That part you said about like curating intimate connections and experiences is really fascinating to me. Could you tell me, I feel like that's a big theme in your entire work so far. How does that connect through your whole artistic process?
Yeah, it definitely is, with it connecting kind of overall in my whole practice. I'm still developing my practice to begin with, so bear with me because I am young and everybody has to learn how they work best. But I found that this interest in intimacy and the intimacy between yourself and with others is interesting because it has such a different dynamic between either yourself and others, or even how you perceive yourself and how others perceive yourself. And so things that I find intimate may not be things that others find intimate. And most of the times my like biggest, not fear, but something that makes me uncomfortable is like not knowing how to be intimate with myself, which sounds very weird, but not knowing where that line is this me or is this some other's concept of me? And how do I not let that concept be carried away into who I am? But you can be compiled of so many more things than just your name, where you're from, how you grew up, and experiences you've been through. And I've used that to kind of understand myself more by using photography. And that's kind of where my most recent series and project is based out of. Just, I have a very extensive archive of photos spanning for 10 years that are my own, because I started photography 9 years ago now, this fall. And it's crazy to think about the fact that I have hundreds of thousands of photos, and I return to some of them very frequently, and I don't know why. Well, I say I don't know why, but I've learned to understand why and figure out the connection that they have with who I am. Also, the physical act of going through so much photography and work is very draining. And I know it's like, it is my job. I work as another photographer, as a photographer of preschool kids and children. And just the like act of having to go through photos and make sure that I have photos that are working for my project and for my job, that's draining in itself. But then thinking about the fact that photos don't really have like a deadline or have a time that they stop mattering or like mattering to somebody, or having like, they always have an importance, even if it's a really technically bad photo that was taken years ago. The ideas and the other processes and concepts that can arise from that photo, even though it's not technically good, can be beneficial and important. And so like thinking about that, then you're thinking about all the bad photos that you've taken and you're like, these are terrible. But why do I think they're terrible? Why are they considered terrible? Why is this point in my time something that I immediately saw that and rejected it? And going back years later and looking at it and saying, maybe it is important now instead of then, and it wasn't supposed to be used then, but now it is.
How do you think your journalism work and your like fine art photography, do you think there's a distinction between the two, or do you think they're more similar to each other?
That is a question that I have grappled with for a good 5 or 6 years. Yeah, I know. It's a lot. But I have always had this like very obvious separation that the work that I make is photography that is beneficial to a consumer. And the art that I make is art. And those are two separate things. But when I looked at other photographers, those are fine art photographers. Those photographers do not do anything but art. And if they do, it's still considered art. If they do something commercial, it's considered art. And I could not wrap my head, or I could not accept the fact that I can do both and I can always be making art. And so a lot of the times when I am on a project, or if I'm on a job that I have to take photos for, I'm only taking photos for one specific goal and one reason. And with my art photography, a lot of the times I was just taking photos with no idea why or no specific use, unless it was like, I can get into it later, but unless it was for a specific project or assignment. And even then, assignments felt so much like work. So it's hard for me to accept that like they can be one and the same. And I'm just now kind of starting to feel a little bit more comfortable with any photos that I take can be considered art, and that I should stop thinking that these two things are separate, because it's something that I create. So why can't it all be art?
When you look at your finished work, what sort of things are you thinking about, especially like now in the climate that we're in?
How it's not finished. I have never felt like I have finished a piece of work. I can like look at photographs and say like, yeah, these two, like learning to take a compliment, those two, I love that diptych. I love those two pieces of work. Well, one piece of work, but that and the book, it's finished from somebody's point of view, but I look at it and I say, but I can go from here and I can keep using the ideas that are within here, but in a different form. And I can keep analyzing how intimacy is depicted both within photographs and within my own life. And so I always see something that's finished and I'm just like, okay, what else can I make from it? Which is good because it means that I want to keep making, but it's also like, if I'm making something that's based off a different project, does that mean I'm just making the project again, but in a different way? And a lot of the times people look down on that, and that's not always what I want to do. I mean, it's kind of discouraged in other areas. Like, I will admit, I have used papers that I wrote in high school for college assignments, but I got A's and they fit the assignment. So like, is that big of a deal? Was I supposed to learn something else from the assignment if I did it again? Yeah, probably, but I would have been doing it a different way. So like, couldn't it be beneficial for both of the ways to be done? And so it's like this weird struggle of not knowing when I'm ever done or when I'm finished, but just constantly thinking and knowing that I'm going to do more, even if it doesn't like make sense or if it's not good. Not good. So, and a lot of the times when I like look at finished work or gallery opening, or my work is somewhere, or even just coming back to it on my own, it's still something that I am proud of, because making art is really hard and it's really difficult, and I admire when people can just finish something and move on to the next thing, because I always feel like I need to have some kind of control, and if I finish something and start something new, I don't have any control of how it's going to go. So that's, and like my series that I currently am working on, it started with an exercise of control, of not being able to have any. And like the little control that I did have, it was by chance, or like what photos I took. But even then, it wasn't control of how I took it or what I did or where it's going to be like seen or hung and what it's going to become. I'm currently working on what was my senior exhibition, and it's now kind of transforming into something bigger because I have a show next month that's at Nebraska Wesleyan, to an actual in-person show, because we didn't get one. So they're giving us the chance to do it, but I'm still wanting to add more onto it. And I'm planning currently, and I am focusing on my studio practice in conceptual research after graduation, which is what I am doing. And I am possibly, I don't know if I am, gonna apply for grad school. Not right now, because that's not a great idea, because we're in the middle of a pandemic, if you haven't heard. And that's expensive and hard to do. And if I move to a big city, that's even harder.
What's your elevator pitch for Allison Woods?
Oh no, don't do that. Okay, this means that I actually am gonna.
I'm joking.
I can just read my
Don't
bio.
You can do your.
Yeah.
Yeah. What are your credentials?
Talk about myself in a third.
Brag about yourself.
Oh, my credentials. I work at Starbucks. I do more than that, but yeah, I worked at Starbucks. I'm a cliche, but I've spoken at different conferences. At the College Arts Association conference, I spoke there last February before any of this chaos ensued. I tried to get more into art history, and I've gone to many different speakers and really hope that I can pursue that passion, because I love learning and I love history. So I'm trying to keep that going. And then I guess a lot of my photos are used on Wesleyan's website and on their articles, even though I'm now like a freelance. I have a website that has my different projects and different parts of photography, because I added commercial and marketing and product photography on there, as well as like weddings and stuff that you can pay for. But then I also have my art on there, which is really cool, because I'm glad I can have the space that like both of them can coincide.
Do you have any closing thoughts?
Leave it at that. Nah, I want to say to people, like, keep working and keep doing, but also it's perfectly fine if you're not making anything, because you're existing as a person, and that's good enough. So keep existing and eat some bread and cheese, because they're both really good. Cook some food, talk to people you love through the phone or wearing a mask, both of you, and maybe get a plant or something. It doesn't always fix everything, but it's kind of nice to have something to care for. Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. Do I have to do anything else?